On my wedding day, right in front of nearly 400 guests, my son and daughter-in-law openly humiliated my new husband, laughing and saying he had no real place in our family and did not deserve respect. Their words echoed through the hall, and members of my daughter-in-law's family joined in, turning my happiest moment into something painfully cold and embarrassing. My chest tightened as I felt my confidence slipping away, but I refused to stay silent. With shaking hands and a steady voice, I stood up and asked every single one of them to leave the reception, choosing dignity over shame. As the room fell quiet, my husband looked at me with a calm strength I had never seen before and spoke words that changed everything I believed about him and about life itself. He gently told me that he was far more successful than anyone imagined and that his journey to that moment would surprise everyone who had just laughed at us. Before I explain what happened next, welcome to my channel where I share powerful life stories every day. Please subscribe and support the video if you enjoy stories of strength and second chances. Now let me take you back 3 hours earlier when I, Eleanor, most people call me Ellie, stood at 61 years old in the most breathtaking venue I had ever seen, filled wall to wall with guests seated on soft ivory chairs, glowing tables dressed in elegant fabrics, and tall arrangements of white and gold flowers that made the room feel magical. I had spent my entire savings on the best food, music, and details because after 15 long years of being alone, of quiet nights and hidden tears, I had finally dared to love again. Standing beside me was Elias, known to most as Eli Vance, dressed simply but perfectly in a clean gray suit, looking proud, calm, and ready to begin a new chapter with me. His silver hair was carefully styled, and his rough hands showed years of honest effort and dedication. He was not a man of luxury. No expensive car, no grand home, just a quiet apartment in a modest area. But when he looked at me, I felt deeply valued, seen, and respected, and that feeling meant more than anything money could buy. Just as I settled into that warmth, a sharp laugh broke the calm, coming from the third row where my son Darius sat beside his wife Tasha. At 38, Darius proudly showed off his costly suit and designer watch, symbols of a lifestyle he believed defined success, something he had always placed above character or kindness. Tasha, 35 and dressed to stand out, carried herself with a sense of superiority and had made our relationship tense from the very beginning of her marriage into our family. She leaned toward her mother and made a remark meant to be heard, and her mother responded with a loud laugh, clearly enjoying the moment at my expense. My face flushed, but I kept my eyes forward, determined not to let them steal this moment from me. Eli gently pressed my hand, offering quiet reassurance without a word, yet the whispers continued as the ceremony went on, mocking his appearance and finding fault where none existed. Their soft laughter filled the space like an unwanted echo, but Eli stood calm and composed, showing a dignity that steadied my heart. When it was time for his vows, his voice was confident and sincere as he spoke about love, loyalty, and choosing me every day not with riches but with devotion and care. Several guests were clearly touched and tears welled in my eyes, until Darius suddenly laughed out loud and stood up, speaking without restraint and drawing all eyes to himself. The room froze, the officiant paused, and my breath caught as Eli squeezed my hand again, his expression peaceful, almost understanding, while I struggled to find my voice and realized this moment was about to change everything. That he accused me of wasting my entire life's effort, reminding me of how hard I had worked and how carefully I had protected what your father left behind, only to claim that I was throwing it all away by marrying a man he considered unworthy. Tasha rose beside him with a cold smile, agreeing loudly and questioning my judgment, while her family burst into laughter, pointing fingers and even lifting their phones as if this deeply personal moment were a form of entertainment. Their reaction felt unreal, like I was standing on display instead of at my own wedding, but something inside me finally broke free. Not sorrow but a powerful surge of strength I hadn't felt in years. I gently released Eli's hand and stepped forward, facing my son directly as my voice came out steady and firm, stronger than I remembered it ever being. I told him that he was right about one thing, that honesty was long overdue, and the room fell into complete silence as every guest watched closely, waiting for my response. Darius stood there with that familiar confident grin, while Tasha crossed her arms, clearly convinced she had already won, and her family continued to whisper and chuckle. Then I spoke my truth, reminding them that I had spent 35 years married to his father, working long, exhausting days, sacrificing my health, my comfort, and my youth so my son could have opportunities one never did. I reminded him that his father was a good man, but when he passed away 15 years earlier, I was left alone, facing life without support or companionship. I asked if he remembered how many times I reached out, how often I asked for simple time together, and how many lonely nights I spent waiting for a call that never came. As I spoke, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face, even as he tried to hide it, and when he asked me not to cause a scene, his voice no longer carried the same confidence it once had. I let out a short laugh, but it carried more pain than humor, because calling this a scene felt deeply unfair after everything I had endured in silence. A real scene was spending every Christmas alone while you chose celebrations with Tasha's family instead, and celebrating my 59th, 60th, and 61st birthdays without a single message or visit from my own child. Soft murmurs spread through the room, and I noticed several guests turning toward my son with uneasy expressions, but Tasha quickly stepped forward, dismissing my words and accusing me of always seeking sympathy and attention. She said Darius had his own life and couldn't be expected to constantly look after me, and hearing that made something inside my chest crack. I quietly told her I never asked to be looked after, only for a little kindness, a little respect, and a fraction of the love I had given freely for decades. Eli remained near the altar, calm and watchful, not interrupting but offering silent support, allowing me the space to finally speak my truth. My voice shook, yet stayed firm as I said that after years of loneliness, I had finally found someone who made me feel valued again, someone who treated me with care and dignity, and that instead of being happy for me, my own son chose to tear that joy apart in front of everyone. Darius shouted accusations, pointing at Eli and judging him based on appearances and lifestyle, while Tasha's family loudly agreed, insisting he had selfish intentions and claiming they were only trying to protect me. Hearing them speak about my life and choices as if they owned them made my blood boil, and I asked my son when he had ever shown concern for my well-being beyond his own interests. When he protested, I calmly reminded him that fairness disappeared long ago, when I needed help for medical care and was turned away, only to later see him spend freely on. The whispers in the room grew stronger, and I noticed heads nodding in understanding while others looked directly at Darius with clear disappointment. My close friends, the few who truly knew my journey, were visibly emotional, and my best friend of 3 decades was quietly wiping away tears without trying to hide them. Still, Tasha pressed on, stepping closer with that familiar sense of superiority and speaking as if she held the final judgment on my life, accusing me of acting out of loneliness and desperation and claiming my choice was something to be ashamed of. Her family loudly agreed, laughing and mocking, some even raising their phones to record the moment as if it were entertainment rather than a woman's breaking point. I could almost imagine the cruel stories they planned to share later, turning my pain into a joke, and that was when something inside me finally shifted. It was no longer hurt or embarrassment, but a calm, steady resolve I had never felt before. I turned toward Eli, who stood quietly by the altar, calm and grounded, and took his hand, asking softly if he was still certain about marrying me despite the chaos around us. His answer was gentle but unwavering, filled with reassurance and quiet strength, reminding me that love does not need approval from those who lack kindness. I then faced the guests once more, recognizing the many good people present who cared for me, but also identifying those who had deliberately turned a meaningful day into something cruel. Calling my son's name, my voice carried firmly across the room as I told him, Tasha and her entire family, to leave immediately, not just the celebration but my life as well. The silence that followed was heavy and complete, and Darius looked at me with shock as if he had never imagined I would finally choose myself. That he looked at me in disbelief, stumbling over his words as he asked if I could possibly mean what I was saying, and I answered with a calm certainty that I had never felt before, telling him this was the most serious I had ever been and that he needed to leave immediately. Tasha laughed loudly, shocked that I would dare remove them, calling it unbelievable that I would ask my own family to go, and I replied without emotion that family does not behave with cruelty, and anyone who did was no longer welcome. I warned them they had only minutes to leave before security would be called, and Darius's expression shifted from shock to anger as he demanded to know how I could do this to my only son, to which I replied firmly that I was asking him, his wife, and everyone who had disrespected us to leave without exception. Tasha stepped closer, pointing accusingly, but I reminded her that this was my wedding, paid for entirely by me, from the venue and food to the music and every detail, giving me the full right to decide who stayed and who left. Her father stood up and tried to intimidate me by speaking of influence and power, But instead of shrinking back, I surprised myself by answering boldly that they had already caused enough harm and could not take anything more from me. Her mother joined in, calling the situation disrespectful and claiming they had come in support, which I calmly corrected by explaining that laughter, mockery, and public humiliation were not support but deliberate cruelty. As their relatives continued to shout remarks meant to hurt, clearly enjoying the conflict, Eli finally spoke for the first time, his voice gentle yet steady, reminding them that judging someone without knowing them only revealed their own character. His words stopped the room, silencing even the loudest voices, but Darius stepped closer to me, his face tense and his tone threatening, saying that if I followed through with this choice, I would lose him forever, and in that moment I realized how much strength it had taken for me to finally stand my ground. When he threatened that I would never see my grandchildren again, the words struck me deeply, stealing the air from my lungs, because my heart belongs to those two little souls more than anything else in the world. The pain was overwhelming, but then I looked at Eli, a man who had shown me more care, patience, and respect in a few short months than my own child had offered me in many long years, and in that moment I understood that I had to make a choice for myself for the first time in my life. With a trembling yet steady voice, I told Darius that if that was truly his decision, then I would accept it, but I would no longer allow manipulation, guilt, or emotional pressure to control my life. Tasha shouted that I was selfish for choosing someone new over my own family, and I answered calmly that Eli was not a stranger, but the man I loved, and anyone who could not respect that love no longer had a place in my world. The anger in my son's eyes was chilling as he warned me I would regret everything, but through tears I told him I would not come running back no matter what. The tension in the room was heavy, and the guests watched in stunned silence, unsure whether to step in, until my closest friend finally rose and spoke with a strength I had always admired, firmly calling out the cruelty of what was happening and demanding that they leave. Her words only fueled more shouting from Tasha's family, turning the once beautiful celebration into chaos, until I raised my voice and demanded an end to it, making it clear that security would be called if they did not leave immediately. As the venue staff stepped forward, Darius announced they were leaving on their own terms, hurling final words meant to wound me, but I answered quietly that true family does not behave this way. At that moment, Eli stepped closer and held my hand, grounding me, and despite the tears on my face, I felt stronger than I ever had before. Tasha quickly grabbed her expensive handbag, the same one I had helped her purchase the year before when she borrowed money she never returned, and announced loudly that it was time to leave, calling the wedding a mistake from the start. One by one her relatives stood up, nearly 20 of them, collecting their things with exaggerated movements, scraping chairs, dropping napkins, and making sure their exit was as disruptive as possible. Her father shouted a final warning near the door, threatening to spread rumors about me throughout the city, and to my own surprise, I answered calmly that I no longer cared what anyone thought. As that group finally left the room, the remaining guests sat frozen in silence, watching as if time itself had paused. Darius lingered behind, turned back at the doorway, and delivered one last painful sentence before walking out, leaving the sound of the closing door echoing through my chest. I stood alone in the center of the ballroom, shaking, fully aware that I had just forced my son out of my wedding and possibly damaged our relationship beyond repair, along with the heartbreaking thought of losing time with my grandchildren. Tears streamed down my face, smudging my makeup and staining my dress, and the day I had dreamed of for so long felt completely shattered. Then Eli stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me, holding me with such care and strength that I felt a sense of safety return, even in the middle of the chaos. I whispered through tears that I was sorry and feared I had ruined everything, but he gently reassured me that I had done nothing wrong, that standing up for myself took courage, and that he was proud of me. We remained there together for a moment, holding each other as the room slowly came back to life, and one by one my friends began to clap, not in celebration but in quiet support and respect, until the entire hall joined in. Eli then eased back, took my hands, and looked at me with a seriousness and warmth I had never seen before, telling me there was something important he needed to share. I asked him what he needed to tell me as I wiped away my tears, and he paused, taking a deep breath as if preparing to share something life-changing. Then he quietly said that he was not who I believed him to be, and my heart skipped as confusion rushed in after everything that had already happened. When he calmly explained that he was extraordinarily wealthy, the words reached my ears but refused to settle in my mind, and I stared at him in disbelief, asking him to repeat himself. He did so without hesitation, explaining that he owned businesses, properties, and investments around the world, more than most people could imagine, and my knees weakened as the reality slowly sank in. My best friend rushed to steady me while I struggled to breathe, overwhelmed by the emotional storm of the night. I questioned everything I thought I knew: his small apartment, his old car, his simple clothes, and he gently explained that it was all a deliberate choice. After losing his first wife years earlier and seeing how money changed people, he chose a quiet life so he could find someone who loved him for who he truly was, not for what he owned. The room was silent as every guest listened closely, captivated by the truth unfolding before them. As understanding slowly replaced shock, he told me that he never let me pay because he wanted equality, not display, and that he had found exactly what he was searching for in me: a woman who offered kindness, respect, and genuine affection without expecting anything in return. Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they carried relief and wonder instead of pain. And when I asked why he chose this moment to tell me, he explained that he needed me to see people's true character before knowing his reality. He wanted my choices to come from strength and clarity, not influence, and as my thoughts raced, he gently reminded me that wealth never changes who someone truly is. Then, with a soft smile and quiet confidence, he began to explain how his journey started from nothing, built through years of hard work and persistence, proving that his greatest success was not money at all, but the life and love he had finally found. He explained that he had saved carefully for years, investing when others were afraid to take risks, buying properties most people dismissed, and slowly building his success step by step through patience and discipline. But when his beloved wife passed away after a long illness, none of that success mattered anymore, because no amount of money could give him one more moment with her, and I could hear the deep sorrow in his voice as he spoke. He told me that after her passing, everything around him changed: friendships became distant, people only reached out when they wanted something, and even family relationships became strained, which taught him how easily wealth can damage genuine connection. That was when he chose to live quietly, keeping his work going but changing his lifestyle completely so he could protect his peace and rediscover what real love felt like. Vivian stood beside me, supporting me, completely stunned as she listened, while Eli gently held my hands and told me that meeting me had brought him back to life. He said I had treated him with respect, listened without judgment, shared laughter, welcomed him into my home, and cared for him without ever questioning what he owned or what he didn't, and that love meant everything to him. I struggled to find words as my world felt turned upside down in a single evening, but he softly told me there was no rush, that he only wanted me to understand I had done the right thing by standing up for our relationship. Slowly, everything began to make sense. The confidence he carried, the way he spoke about work, his knowledge of the world, and the calm certainty he always had. When I asked if anyone else knew his truth, he mentioned his longtime lawyer who was present that day as a witness. And when I looked over and saw the well-dressed man nod quietly, it all became clear. Still overwhelmed, I asked what this revelation meant for us, and Eli smiled with the same warmth I had fallen in love with, explaining that it meant honesty, security, and a future free from fear, but most importantly, it meant that real love mattered more than wealth. Tears streamed down my face as the emotions finally broke through, and Vivian hugged me tightly, whispering that she had always known this man was truly special. I had always sensed it, but now it was undeniable. Guests began approaching to offer kind words and congratulations, yet I remained in stunned silence, struggling to process the whirlwind of revelations. Then Eli spoke softly, revealing something I could hardly believe. The $5,000 debt my son had lent me with interest had already been paid off months ago, anonymously, so I wouldn't even know. My voice escaped in disbelief as he explained that he wanted to see how Darius would act, whether he would return the money or admit it had been settled. And of course he never mentioned it. The betrayal hit me anew. My own son, the child I had nurtured with so much love, had deceived me, asked for repayment, and exposed his true character on what was supposed to be my happiest day. Eli pulled me into a comforting embrace, reminding me that though the truth was painful, it was far better to know now than to live in ignorance. I nodded, acknowledging the harsh reality, and asked what we should do next. His steady gaze reassured me as he said it was time to continue with our wedding, surrounded only by those who genuinely loved and supported us, and then begin our new life together. The minister, an elderly man with decades of experience, approached and softly asked if we wished to proceed, And I glanced at Eli, at our friends, at Vivian smiling through tears, and knew the answer. Yes, I said firmly. The ceremony resumed, this time free of interruptions, mockery, or cruelty, replaced by an atmosphere of warmth, respect, and heartfelt celebration. When Eli slid the ring onto my finger and declared us husband and wife, the room erupted in genuine applause, and I kissed him with every ounce of happiness I had felt in years, all the earlier pain dissolving in that instant. The reception transformed completely without the toxic presence of Darius, Tasha, and their family. Laughter, dancing, and joy filled the room as friends came to tell me how proud they were, admiring my courage and honesty, admitting in some cases that they had always known how poorly Darius had treated me but never spoken up. During dinner, Eli stood and asked for attention, his voice calm yet commanding, thanking everyone for witnessing not only a wedding but also the bravery of a woman defending her dignity and choosing the life, and the love, she truly deserved. Eli turned to the room and said softly but confidently that he was honored to be my husband, and applause immediately filled the space, warm and heartfelt. He continued, addressing the questions he knew many of us had, and revealed that he was the founder and owner of Vance Development Group, one of the largest and most respected real estate firms in the Southeast. The room gasped collectively. VDG was legendary, responsible for iconic skyscrapers, luxury hotels, commercial centers, and residential developments, some of which I had even cleaned floors in when I worked as a janitor years ago. He explained that after losing his first wife, he had chosen to live simply to avoid the influence of people drawn to wealth, seeking instead someone who would love him for who he was, and that someone was me. He described how I had loved him sincerely when I believed he was just a modest retired worker, giving me his full heart in return, and he emphasized that such love was priceless. Then, holding my hand and raising me to stand beside him, he promised in front of everyone that he would dedicate his life to my happiness, provide everything I deserved, and protect me from anyone who tried to harm me. The ovation that followed was thunderous, with Vivian openly crying, friends embracing, and the energy in the room radiating genuine joy. Still, my thoughts kept drifting back to one image. Darius leaving the room earlier, rage and contempt written on his face, certain I had made the worst mistake of my life. I wondered if he now knew who Eli really was, or that he had insulted and humiliated a billionaire. Sensing my worry, Eli leaned close during our dance and whispered that he understood why I was thinking about him. I admitted it still hurt because, no matter everything, he is my son. Eli reassured me gently, reminding me that being my son did not give him the right to hurt or manipulate me, and that I had every right to defend my life and happiness. That he was right when he said that real family love should never involve control, shame, or emotional harm, and even though I knew that truth deep inside, a mother's heart is never simple. You can fully understand that your child has hurt you and still love them just the same, missing them even when their presence causes pain, a contradiction only a parent can truly grasp. The celebration carried on late into the night as we danced, shared cake, and raised glasses of champagne that cost more than I once earned in an entire month of hard work, making the whole experience feel unreal. That morning, I had woken up as Ellie, a 61-year-old woman who had spent her life working to survive, and by nightfall I was Ellie Vance, married to a man whose life was beyond anything I had imagined. When we finally reached the private suite Eli had arranged at the city's most elegant hotel, the reality hit me all at once. The room was larger than my apartment, with tall windows overlooking the glowing city, a grand bed dressed in fine linens, and a marble bathroom that felt more like a spa. Sitting on the edge of the bed, still in my dress, I admitted that I didn't know how to feel, caught between disbelief and exhaustion. Eli sat beside me, held my hand, and gently reminded me that nothing about him or our love had changed, that he was still the same man who had fallen for my laughter, kindness, and resilience. I whispered that money changes everything, but he calmly disagreed, telling me our life could remain simple or become more comfortable, and that the choice would always be ours together. Looking into his eyes, I saw the same warmth and sincerity I had known from the beginning, and I finally understood that wealth had not changed the man I loved. After a quiet pause, I asked why he had chosen me, a widow with a complicated life and difficult family ties, and he smiled in a way that instantly softened my heart, preparing to answer with the same honesty that had carried us this far. "Do you remember the day we met?" Eli asked, and I nodded, recalling the farmer's market where I had been hunting for the cheapest vegetables. Our carts had bumped accidentally and I apologized over and over, though I hadn't realized he remembered every detail. He smiled as he recounted how I had knelt on my bad knee to pick up a tomato that had rolled under a shelf, handing it back to him with care, and how that small act of kindness had made him see immediately that I was someone special. He went on to tell me how we kept running into each other every Thursday, and each time he noticed something new. My patience with the vendors, my generosity toward children selling sweets, the way I treated everyone with respect. "I saw your heart, Ellie, and I fell in love with it," he said, wiping the tears that had been flowing from my cheeks all day. He told me that of all the women he could have chosen, he chose me because I was real, kind, and had brought life back into his world. We kissed, a kiss that carried a promise of facing whatever the future might hold together. Even in that perfect, luxurious moment, my thoughts drifted to Darius, wondering how he would react to the truth, if our relationship could ever heal, and whether I even wanted it to. The next morning I woke in that enormous bed, wrapped in sheets softer than clouds, momentarily thinking it had all been a dream. The wedding, the humiliation, Eli's astonishing revelations. But then I turned and saw him sleeping beside me, and I knew it was all real. I quietly got up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city bathed in golden dawn, feeling the smallness of everything below and wondering if that's how Eli viewed the world from his life of experience and wealth. "Good morning, my love," he said softly behind me, tousled hair and a gentle smile greeting me. "Good morning," I replied, heart full yet anxious. He wrapped me in a hug from behind, and I admitted I was thinking about everything. Darius, what had happened, what came next. Eli kissed my head and told me he had something to show me, something that would help me understand our life together in a new way. Half an hour later, I found myself in a private helicopter, a place I had never imagined being, as Eli handled the controls effortlessly, showing me yet another side of the extraordinary life we were beginning together. "I learned to fly 20 years ago," Eli explained when he noticed my astonished expression. "It's useful for business, but it also gives me freedom." As we soared over the city, he began pointing out the buildings he owned. "That hotel, the Grand Plaza, is mine. I built it 15 years ago. 400 rooms, one of the most successful in the region." Then he gestured toward a shopping center, the Sun Promenade, also mine. "And those 3 apartment buildings over there, plus the industrial complex near the port." My disbelief grew with every building he named. He wasn't just wealthy. He literally owned pieces of the city I had lived in all my life, buildings where I had once cleaned floors without ever knowing who the true owner was. "See that hospital?" he said, pointing to a modern building with a red cross on the roof. "I donated it 5 years ago. After Letitia died of cancer, I realized the public system didn't have enough resources. This hospital provides free cancer treatment for low-income patients." I was stunned. "Completely free?" I asked. "Exactly," he said. "No one should die because they can't pay. Letitia had access to the best doctors and still we lost her. But at least I can help others." I began to see Eli in a new light. Not just a rich man, but someone who used his wealth to make a real difference. "I also run several foundations," he continued as we landed on the rooftop of the Vance Development Group headquarters, "one for educational scholarships, one for social housing, and one for entrepreneurs who can't get bank loans." The offices were elegant but understated, full of bright, open spaces where employees greeted him warmly, not with fear or servility. "I want you to meet someone," Eli said, guiding me to a large top-floor office. Inside stood Marcus King, the lawyer he had mentioned at the wedding. A distinguished man in his 50s with silver hair and a commanding presence. "Mrs. Hayes," he greeted with a slight bow, "it's an honor to meet you properly. Eli has spoken about you for months." "Really?" asked surprised. "Absolutely," Marcus smiled. "He told me he found someone genuine and special. After witnessing yesterday, I can confirm he was right." Eli gestured for us to sit, and Marcus opened a leather folder, presenting papers. "Mrs. Hayes, your husband has prepared some important documents. First, he has added your name to all his main bank accounts. You have complete access to all my funds," Eli said, his voice calm but firm. My jaw dropped. "What? No, I can't accept that. We just got married yesterday." "You are my wife," he replied gently but with conviction. "What's mine is yours. It's really that simple." Marcus King continued, "He's also transferred the titles of 3 properties into your name: a beach house, a city apartment, and a mountain retreat. Additionally, an investment fund worth $50 million has been established in your name." My head was spinning. 50 million. For me, a woman who had spent decades worrying about rent and bills? Eli, this is too much, I whispered, barely able to speak. Yes, you can, he interrupted softly. And that's not all. I've set up trust funds for Miles and Chloe. Each of them will have $10 million available when they turn 25 to use for education, a business, or whatever they wish. Tears streamed down my face. My grandchildren, the innocent little souls, deserved security, and Eli was already thinking about them. Why? I managed to whisper. Because they are innocent, Eli said. And they are your blood, Ellie. What matters to you matters to me. Marcus went on to explain life insurance policies, diversified investments, and commercial properties. The numbers were so enormous that my mind struggled to comprehend them. When Marcus finished, Eli added, "You also have complete freedom in how you live. We can continue simply if that's what you want, or we can travel the world, or you can dedicate yourself to causes you care about. This is your life now, you decide." Later, we toured his company's offices. I met managers, architects, and engineers, all speaking about Eli with genuine respect and admiration. He wasn't just a boss, he was a leader who truly cared for his people. "My philosophy is simple," he explained over dinner at the exclusive top-floor restaurant. "If you take care of your people, they take care of your business. Many of my employees have been with me for more than 20 years. Watching them grow, start families, and achieve their dreams makes me happier than any sum of money ever could." Eli's eyes softened, but his tone remained steady. "Yes, some of them are. But that's not your responsibility, Ellie. You've spent a lifetime giving and sacrificing for him, and yet he still acted with cruelty and entitlement. If you intervene now, you take away the only chance he has to truly understand the consequences of his choices. Sometimes the hardest act of love is letting someone face the results of their actions." I wiped my tears, my chest tightening with a mixture of fear and guilt. "But what if he ends up in real danger?" I whispered, panic creeping back in. Eli held my hands firmly. "Mark and I are monitoring everything closely. We will make sure he isn't in mortal danger. He needs to face the reality he's created, but we'll ensure it doesn't get physically life-threatening. Your role now isn't to rescue him, it's to protect yourself and live your life fully, without the fear that you must constantly fix everything for him." I took a shaky breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. The weight of it all, my son's betrayal, his financial recklessness, and the impossible choice between love and discipline, weighed heavily on me. Yet in Eli's calm, steady presence, I began to see a path forward. A path where I could love my son from a distance, protect my grandchildren, and still honor the life and happiness I had fought so hard to finally achieve. It was terrifying, but it also felt liberating. "I think I understand," I murmured, clutching his hand. "I want to help him, but not at the cost of my own peace." Eli smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile. "Exactly, Ellie. That is true love too. What if something happens to him? What if Tasha, or worse, my grandchildren, are in danger?" I asked, my voice tight with worry. Eli reassured me calmly. "They are safe. Mark has already taken care of everything. We've hired discreet security to keep an eye on them. Miles and Chloe are completely protected. No one will touch them." That eased me slightly, but I still felt uneasy. "And what about Darius? Are you monitoring him as well?" I asked. Eli leaned back, his face serious. "Yes, and here's where it gets interesting. 3 days ago, Darius discovered who I really am. One of his business partners showed him a Forbes article listing me among the wealthiest men in the Southeast. My heart sank. And then," I whispered. He continued, "At first he didn't believe it. He thought it was just a coincidence of names. But when he saw the photos, he recognized me. Since then, he's tried to reach me 12 times. Calls, texts, emails, all through official company channels." I swallowed hard. "And you?" I asked. "I ignored every attempt," Eli said, "but Mark saved all the messages. Do you want to see them?" I nodded, even though part of me dreaded it. Eli pulled out his phone and began reading. First message: "Mr. Elias Vance, I sincerely regret the misunderstanding at the wedding. I didn't know who you were. Please allow me to explain." He paused and looked at me. Notice he says he regrets the misunderstanding, not his behavior, as if the only problem was that he didn't know I had wealth. He went on to the next. "Mr. Vance, this is Darius, Ellie's son. I need to discuss a business opportunity with you. I have a proposal that could benefit both of us. Eli shook his head with a bitter laugh. He doesn't even mention you. Straight to business. He continued, Mr. Vance, I'm facing a serious financial problem. As your wife's son, I hope we can talk as family. I'm confident we can reach a solution that works for everyone, especially Mom. I felt my stomach churn. He's using my name to manipulate you, I said. Exactly, Eli agreed. He read another. Mr. Vance, I know I made mistakes at the wedding. I wasn't thinking clearly, but I am Ellie's only son. The grandchildren she loves are my children. Do you really want to break this family? I can make her happy if you help me fix my problems. My blood boiled. That's emotional blackmail, I said, my anger overtaking my worry. Eli nodded solemnly and read the last message. Elias, I need $500,000 by the end of the week, or I'll be in serious trouble. As my mother's husband, you have a responsibility to help our family. I promise to pay it back with interest. I trust you understand. I went silent, letting the words sink in. My son hadn't apologized. He hadn't tried to repair anything between us. Instead, he had attempted to use me and my family for his own gain. He hadn't shown any real remorse. All he wanted was money, trying to use my marriage to solve his own financial mess. What are you planning to do? I finally asked, my voice quiet but tense. Eli looked at me steadily. That's the question. What do you want me to do? You're his mother. You're my wife. This affects you as much as it affects me. I walked to the balcony, staring at the city below, thinking about my son. Desperate, scared, probably scheming his next move. Part of me, the mother who could never turn away, wanted to save him, to give him money and fix everything. But another part of me, the part that had been humiliated in front of hundreds, manipulated for years, and had finally found her voice, knew that would be a mistake. Don't give him the money, I said finally, my voice firmer than I expected. Not like this. Not yet. Eli stepped behind me and hugged me. Are you sure? He asked. No, I admitted, but it's the right thing. If we bail him out without consequences, he'll never learn. He needs to hit rock bottom, to realize he can't treat people this way and expect a free pass. Eli kissed my head. It's a brave choice, he said. Painful, I corrected him, but necessary. The next few days were an emotional whirlwind. Eli and I went on our honeymoon to his private Caribbean island. A paradise with white sands, clear water, and complete privacy. I tried to enjoy it, but my mind kept drifting to Darius. Mark kept us updated. Creditors were closing in, his luxury car repossessed, bank accounts frozen, and the house he shared with Tasha and the children in foreclosure. And Tasha? I asked during a video call. She left him 2 days ago, Mark said, calm and professional. She moved in with her parents and took the kids. She filed for divorce yesterday morning. I felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. Losing your wife, your children, your home, and facing financial ruin all at once. It was devastating. And Darius? I asked. Not well, Mark admitted. He's been drinking heavily, barely eating, reaching out to old friends and partners, but everyone has turned away now that they know he's broke. I murmured bitterly, how convenient. There's more, Mark added, a serious note in his voice. Darius had even tried to sell his version of the story to the media, calling newspapers and TV shows and offering an exclusive about how his mother married a wealthy man and abandoned him when he needed help. I felt a surge of anger when I heard this, but Eli calmly took my hand and assured me everything was under control. He explained that our public relations team had already stepped in, and no serious outlet would run the story, especially after being shown recordings from the wedding that clearly revealed how Darius had behaved. I was shocked to learn there were videos, but Eli told me several guests had filmed the incident, and with my approval, those clips were used carefully to protect my name. If Darius tried to make me look like the bad one, the truth was already documented. Sitting quietly, I realized how far my son had fallen, trying to profit from my life and portray himself as a victim. Slowly, I said I needed to see him even though Eli was worried. I needed to face him and finally say what I had been holding inside. 3 days later, I stood outside a worn-down apartment building in a struggling part of the city, a place that felt painfully familiar from my earlier years raising him. The air was heavy, the walls marked, and the stairs creaked as I climbed. I asked Eli and the security team to stay back. This was something I had to do alone. When Darius opened the door, my heart ached despite everything. He looked exhausted, unkempt, and defeated, standing in a small, cluttered apartment that reflected his situation. This wasn't the confident man from my wedding, but someone clearly broken. When he whispered my name and said he was glad I came, I stayed at the doorway and told him I wasn't there to stay, only to speak. He begged me to come inside and explain, talking about losing his family and everything else, but the years of hurt poured out of me. I reminded him that actions have consequences, that after embarrassing me publicly and insulting the man I loved, life wasn't going to remain unchanged. When he tried to excuse himself by saying he didn't know who Eli really was, the truth became painfully clear. If he had known about the money, everything would have been different, and that realization said more than any apology ever could. I told him calmly but firmly that he hadn't cared about my happiness or my heart, only how my marriage affected him financially. As his tears fell, I knew I had finally spoken the truth I had been carrying for far too long. He begged me again, saying he was sorry, admitting he had acted out of fear and envy, but his words only made the truth clearer. I reminded him how he had stayed distant for years, ignored my calls and only reached out when he needed something, treating me less like a mother and more like a financial backup. He agreed, calling himself selfish and admitting he had failed me, saying he had lost everything and that I was the only person he had left. That was when I told him, with a pain that settled deep in my chest, that he had lost me too the moment pride and money became more important than respect. When he begged on his knees, promising to do anything to fix things, I asked why every message he sent focused on money instead of a genuine apology, and why he tried to turn our family story into a public spectacle. His silence answered everything. I told him I knew about his debts, his separation, and how he had tried to use my marriage to escape his problems. When he admitted he was desperate and needed a large amount of money quickly because of serious pressure, I stayed calm and told him the truth, that he had come to me not out of love but out of need. He insisted he missed me, but I asked what exactly he missed. A mother who never said no, who fixed his mistakes, who carried the weight quietly. When he spoke about missing the safety and care of childhood, my eyes burned with tears, but I told him that version of him was gone, replaced by someone who valued wealth over people and allowed others to damage our bond. He begged for another chance, but I reminded him of the countless chances I had already given, the money never returned, the plans broken, and the pain I swallowed for years. Then I told him something he didn't expect, that Eli had wanted to help, that the amount he needed meant very little to him, and that he could solve everything instantly. Hope flickered across his face, only to disappear when I explained I had said no, because saving him now would only keep him stuck, never learning responsibility, never choosing people over money, and never becoming the man I once hoped he would be. He panicked and told me he was afraid because dangerous people were pressuring him and making serious threats. And hearing that shook me deeply, because no matter what had happened, he was still my child and I didn't want harm to come to him. I admitted that it scared me too, but I explained that I could no longer keep rescuing him while he avoided responsibility, because that cycle had already cost us too much. When he demanded to know what he was supposed to do, overwhelmed and desperate, I told him that he needed to take the same steps any accountable adult would take. Go to the authorities, report the situation, ask for protection, and begin rebuilding his life honestly from the ground up. When he argued that the system wouldn't help him, I told him I wasn't offering money, but something stronger, and I handed him the contact information of Eli's lawyer, someone experienced enough to guide him legally, protect his rights, and help him organize his financial collapse properly. He asked quietly if, once everything settled, I would return to his life, and I told him that choice depended entirely on whether he truly changed and became the person I raised him to be. When he asked about seeing his children and reconnecting with me as their grandmother, my heart tightened, and I promised to speak with their mother, while making it clear that her decision had to be respected. When he blamed her anger on me and my marriage, I calmly said that avoiding responsibility was easier than admitting the role their choices played. As I turned to leave, he stopped me and asked if I could ever forgive him, and I told him honestly that I didn't know yet, but I wanted to believe that the good in him still existed, and if he wanted forgiveness he would have to prove it through real change, not words. "Prove you're worth it," I had told him months ago, and now 6 months later I sat on the terrace of our new ocean view villa, designed by Eli just for me, feeling the breeze and sipping my morning coffee, amazed at the life I had never imagined. My phone rang, Vivian urging me to turn on the news immediately, and my heart raced as I watched. On the screen was Darius, standing confidently in a neat suit before a group of young people at a community center. Gone was the broken, desperate man I had visited 6 months earlier. He spoke openly about losing everything: his house, his money, his marriage, but also about the lessons he had learned, especially the hardest one from me: facing the consequences of his actions. With a slight tremble in his voice, he admitted how he had hated me at first, but now recognized my decision to let him struggle as the greatest act of love. The news report showed his new apartment, small, clean, and orderly, and how he had started working at a construction company, learning to rebuild his life from the ground up. Darius was now sharing his story at schools and community centers, teaching young people about financial responsibility and the dangers of valuing money over relationships. He mentioned that he and I were slowly rebuilding our connection, speaking once a week with honest conversations that carried both pain and hope. Behind me, Eli's hand rested gently on my shoulder, and I realized that through patience, boundaries, and guidance, my son had finally started to change. And for the first time in years, I felt a real sense of pride and cautious optimism for the future. The bankruptcy had been painful and humiliating for Darius, but it was necessary for him to face reality. 2 months after our difficult meeting, I received a surprise: a 10-page handwritten letter from him. Not a text, not an email. He had taken the time to write every word by hand. In it, he admitted his arrogance, his mistakes, his obsession with money, and how he had allowed Tasha to poison our relationship. Most importantly, he offered a sincere, heartfelt apology. No requests for money, no excuses, just genuine remorse. I cried for hours reading it, and Eli held me through all the emotions I couldn't yet sort out. A week later, I gave Darius my phone number, and our first conversation was awkward, full of long pauses, but we kept talking. Every week, without fail, we spoke for 30 minutes, he later told a reporter. When asked about his children, he explained they were attending co-parenting therapy with Tasha so the kids could have stable, functional parenting despite the divorce. Then, looking straight into the camera, he offered advice to anyone in a similar situation. Pride can destroy you, materialism can blind you, and those who truly love you, those willing to let you fail so you can learn, are the ones to value most. Finally, he turned to me directly. Mom, I hope you see this. Every day I work to be the son you deserved. I'm trying to be better. I know I don't deserve immediate forgiveness, but I want you to know I understand now and I love you. I always have. Tears streamed down my face as Eli hugged me tightly. The following month, another surprise arrived. Mark called to tell me that Darius had repaid the $5,000 Eli had covered for him, completing the first step of his transformation. Darius worked tirelessly for 4 months to repay every cent he owed, Mark explained, and that night I sent him my first text, just 3 words: "I'm proud of you." 20 minutes later, his reply warmed my heart. That means more than any money in the world. 2 weeks after that, we met at a neutral coffee shop. It felt awkward at first, with so much to say and yet nothing to say, but slowly we began to talk and reconnect. I asked if he wanted to see his children again, and his eyes lit up. "They are my grandchildren," I said simply. I never stopped loving them. The reunion with Miles and Chloe was one of the most emotional moments of my life. Eli was wonderful with them, teaching them to swim, telling stories, and showing them that kindness matters more than wealth. One day, while watching the children play on the beach, Darius quietly said, "Thank you for not giving up on me, Mom." I replied, "Parents never give up on their children. Sometimes we have to let them fall so they can learn to fly." Inspired by our experiences, Eli and I created the Letitia Foundation in honor of his late wife, supporting elderly women abandoned by their families, a cause that felt deeply personal to me. Exactly 1 year after our wedding, Eli and I renewed our vows in a small, intimate ceremony at home with only those who truly mattered. Darius was there with Miles and Chloe, and when it was our turn, Eli took my hands and said, "A year ago, I promised you eternal love before you knew everything about me. Today I promise it again." Later, Darius approached him and said, "I never properly apologized, Mr. Vance. You are a good man and Mom is lucky to have found you." Eli smiled and shook his hand. "The past is the past, Darius. What matters is who you are today." That night, lying in Eli's arms, I reflected on how much had changed. A year ago, I had been humiliated on the most important day of my life. Now I had love, security, purpose, dignity, and a peace I had never known. When Eli asked what I was thinking, I said, My whole life changed forever and I wouldn't change a thing. Everything led me here, taught me who I truly am and gave me the strength to defend myself and find you. Eli kissed my forehead. You are the strongest woman I know, Ellie. I smiled and corrected him gently. No, I'm a woman who learned to be strong because I had no other choice and that made all the difference. I'm so glad I could share my story with you. If it touched your heart, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Comment below with your city and the time you're watching from. I'd love to know where all of you wonderful people are tuning in from. And if you want to support me a little extra, you can send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day, and now 2 of my most popular stories are ready for you to choose and watch next.